All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Ashes to Art podcast. I am your host, Julie Kennedy, and I'm so happy to be here. What's the word? What's higher than happy? Jubilant. I am so jubilant to be here. Juby. Okay, that's a word between me and you now. Okay, we're Juby. So, welcome back. I am feeling a lot better from my cold, thank goodness. It really put it in perspective the state of my immune system because I was sick since after Christmas and it is like the second week of January. So this was like 2 weeks worth of the same congestion, and I had to like move up from Dayquil and NyQuil, and I had to get this other medication specifically for like mucus thinning, and I never had to do that before in my life. I was like, is this what old people do? Is this what getting old is? It really made me think about the state of my immune system. So I have a juicer coming in the mail with some cute little juice bottles, some bigger ones and some little ones, and to make like little immuno shots or something. I'm not sure what they're called. I'm new to this stuff. I've always been interested. I feel like I don't get or like I don't follow the food triangle pyramid that well. I'm kind of lacking in the fruits and vegetables department. I would like to bring it up, and I was making smoothies for a while there, but I was having issues with like this blender itself, and I never did upgrade. I don't think it was strong enough to handle ice. It was just one of those handheld blenders. But anyway, I'm gonna try juicing, okay? And then maybe one day I'll get a new blender, but we're gonna try juices. And yeah, I'm just glad I'm feeling a lot better. Filming those last few episodes, I could feel it because I had one ear clogged and it just felt like I couldn't hear out of one ear. So when I came time to filming, I was kind of uncomfortable. So I'm just happy to feel back to normal. I really am. I'm so happy to be back and actually feeling better. So yeah, this is going to be the first episode where I have to give a disclaimer because this is my recovery story and I have some stories to talk about and things to unpack that might trigger someone. And I just want this to be a safe place for it, no judgment. And I know it's really hard for me to even talk about certain topics online like this because I don't know, I just like think professionally. Is putting my recovery story like ever gonna hinder a job opportunity for me? And I got to thinking and I was like, if my recovery story that means the world to me ever hinders some type of job opportunity, then like that place just isn't for me. So I shouldn't be there anyway. So this is part of me. This is who I am. Yeah, this is just the path that I was on. And I know I will be safe in an environment when stories like this are welcomed and honored, basically. I just think it's very important to get out, get things all on the table and I want to be as transparent with you guys as possible. There are some things I will have to keep out only because I do believe something should be kept between us and our therapist. Not everything needs to be online like that. There are just things where I'm more comfortable sharing it in a more private setting and not online, but I'm gonna do my best to share as much as I can. So before we begin, let's say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together. Give me the courage and the strength to share this message and this story. It is not easy, but I hope that if this story could help at least one person in the audience listening today, then this podcast is doing its job. So help us get this message out today clearly and honestly. And yeah, thanks for bringing us together today. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. All right, let's get started. I would first like to frame this story with Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which the Lord your God is giving you. The reason why I want to start off with this is because in order to start any story, especially a story about addiction, you kind of have to know and understand the childhood. And this is a very sensitive topic for me, and especially for my family and people involved, because I am not trying to throw anybody under the bus. I'm not trying to exploit anybody and make anybody in my family uncomfortable. So I really want to approach this childhood of mine with grace and love and compassion. I'm not going into this bitter. There was a point in my life, obviously, where I handled situations that happened in my childhood through addiction, but those days are behind me, okay? I have a different outlook now as I'm in recovery. And I'm not suppressing anything. I'm not trying to change anything. Like, I'm aware, but I want to tell this story as honest but gentle as possible. Okay. I love my family. I love my mother and I love my father. So I just want to start that with my foundation. I want to honor them as much as I can. So before I begin, I want to say this clearly and lovingly. Everything I share today is spoken with grace, not blame, with understanding, not resentment, with honor, especially towards my mother and my family. This is my story told through love. And to understand my story, you also must have to understand that it didn't begin with me. I was raised by strong, beautiful women. My mother, she had me on her own, and my grandmother had my mother on her own, and my great grandmother had my grandmother on her own. Not because these women failed, but because the fathers in their lives were not the ones meant to stay. When I say I grew up without my biological father, I can't separate that from the truth that my mother did too. This is not bitterness, it's just context. We come from a culture marked by intergenerational trauma, and we don't deny that truth, but we also don't let it define our ending. I don't look at my lineage and see brokenness. I see resilience. Firstborn daughters who learned strength early. Women who kept going. I would like to start off with my birth story. When my mother went into labor with me, she called my biological father. And the only thing he said was, "May the force be with you." And then he hung up. Kind of funny now, but in the moment, like, that's kind of sad. Next is my grandmother was there when I was born, so it was my mom and my grandma. My father was deep in his addiction at the time, and I didn't grow up in that picture perfect two-parent household. But I grew up with a mother who worked relentlessly, who put food on the table, who pursued an education, and who gave me everything she could. And I honor her for that. When I was 7, my mom did meet the man who would become my stepdad, the man who removed addiction and violence from our lives completely. And from that point on, my childhood was marked by movement because I traveled city to city as my mom pursued her education all the way through law school. I wasn't rooted in one town, one school, or one routine. I was just raised by the example of a mom getting her education. And my mom showed me what discipline and ambition and perseverance look like. Looking back, I see now that my stepdad became someone I deeply relate to in art, in the way we think, the values in conversation. We're one of those people where we're both type A, both type B, both introverted, but also extroverted when we need to be. Like, we just share a lot of similarities. And I just didn't see that as a child. I think I was still really biased towards my biological father. Looking back, I'm like, why did I do that? But I was a child. So I just wasn't ready for that relationship yet with my stepdad. And I carried that bias, and I just didn't know how to process it, calling another man, dad was just really, it's kind of confusing on kids. So I will admit to that. But now, like I said, we have a really, really good relationship as adults. And that's not trauma I blame, more like maturity and immaturity. I think I was a little immature towards it in the beginning. So, what I'm trying to say is my childhood, I had an absent dad, but there was a substitute, but I tended to push it out in the beginning. And I'm owning up to that now. I see it that way now. In the beginning, I did not always see this story as maturely as I do now, which I think caused me to pick up addiction, and I'm going to get to that right now. Let's just talk about it. The first door I shouldn't have opened. At age 12, I began sneaking out, and cigarettes came first for me. Also, again, disclaimer, I'm going to be talking about addiction and alcohol and drugs and stuff. So cigarettes came first for me. Then over a Christmas break from school, my biological father was out of prison and had his own home in Colorado. And I went to go visit him. And I'm admitting this now. I don't know if my dad watches my podcast, but I should probably tell him this. I lied and I told him I already smoked marijuana and drank alcohol just so that he would buy it for me. And he didn't know it was my first time. And I don't know if he would have done it if he had known, because he was trying to hide marijuana from me. And I was just curious and young and had that freedom away from my mom, I guess. And I just went for it. And yeah, it started off as a lie. I lied that I did it to do it. So when I say my dad introduced me to these things first, or I was first introduced to addiction through my biological dad, just know it was based off of a lie. And alcohol became the gateway. I struggled with alcohol from that point forward with friends, and I found like-minded friendships that also shared this same addiction. And this was when it all started to take root. And when I returned home, I found people who shared those same habits. By my teenage years, addiction became to define my reputation. My grades fell, then briefly rose again, and then fell completely. I dropped out of school, one of my deepest regrets, and I missed milestones like going to prom or just those spirit week type of things in school. I missed having like a high school boyfriend, I've always thought I'd become a cheerleader. Like I had school goals that I never did meet. And yeah, I just missed the opportunities that I know I would have thrived in. And I talked about that in my previous story. I remember when I hit 18, my parental figures, my grandparents, my mom, like the lectures stopped coming. There was hardly any punishments and no resistance taking place. I think they were like, she's an adult now. They were sort of like setting me free as an adult and was letting me figure it out. Yeah, so everyone in my life who loved me, I'm not denying that, but they just didn't know what else to do anymore. And I'm sure this caused them to pray even harder for me. And this is also when I drifted further from God, when I got the independence as being an adult and being basically trapped in this endless cycle of drinking. And there were seasons in my active addiction where I would settle down and get a job, and I would be sober for some periods of times, but it just never lasted. It was never the way it is now. And I want to highlight that I do believe in heaven and hell, and I do believe in God and the devil. And there is a difference between having favor with God and having favor with the devil. And I believed after I hit 18, I started to have more favor with the devil because I was on my own and I was choosing not to listen. I didn't need to. I was my own adult. Looking back, I was not even close to an adult. I was still just a baby. And I had favor with the devil. That means that I was getting away with worldly pleasures. I wasn't getting in trouble. And I think that's what's really scary when we hit adulthood and we're living in the world is we tend to get away with it more. And when I was underage, well, I technically was underage. I was under 21, but like, I mean, I wasn't a legal adult. And I had my mom to still be able to have that say in my life. I think that was also God's favor over my life as well. That helped keep me as functional as possible. And once I hit 18, I just remember everything starts to get blurry then. And I just know I drifted away from God and I wasn't getting very many consequences anymore. I was kind of getting away with these things, and you would think I would enjoy them more. And I know God did reach out to me through that dream that I was going to hell. And so he did send me guideposts. He did send me messages here and there. I didn't listen. And I essentially had favor with the devil, and I was getting away with everything, and I felt untouchable, and I was comfortable with being bad. And he gave me that dream of going to hell, and it scared me sober for a moment, but I still kept going. And because free will is powerful, but it's also very dangerous. Before I hit rock bottom, so between 18 and 20, it got really messy, to say the least. And I was off on my own, living with my ex at the time, states away. And I remember my story where I only had 2 suitcases to my name. And when I came home, I was no longer allowed to live under my mom's roof anymore. She had my brother and sister living there now. They were just very young, and I wasn't in the state to be around that. And like, I totally understand why I basically got the boot, because I mean, I wouldn't want them to see me in that condition anyway. So it just wasn't safe to have me there in and out. And like, you know what I mean? Like, so I basically got the boot, and my grandma didn't want to take me in either. It was my great grandma who took me in, and she let me move into her house. This is when I got a job at a homeless shelter, and I was really drowning in alcohol. And I believe in the spiritual realm, and I do believe working in a place like that where you're surrounded by other alcoholics too, there's just like this alcoholic spirit presence. And I think that was also in my life too, because I had to pass a drug test for this job and to keep it. So I was no longer smoking marijuana. It was just alcohol at this point. And it was to the point where I was hiding alcohol. I was becoming like a closet drinker. I was drinking constantly, and I was functioning on the outside. I was going to work, but I was like dying on the inside. And I had alcohol in the shower. I had alcohol in my closet. I had alcohol under my bed, in my car. That was probably the worst time with my drinking, was in this season of working at this place. And then one night, another drug entered the picture. One I never imagined I'd ever touch. And just like before, I lied and I said I had tried it. And alcohol definitely opened that door. It was definitely the gateway for me. If I was sober, I don't think I would have touched that drug ever. And that night just changed everything. That lie changed everything. And this is where it's going to get really hard. I started to have hallucinations of dark, shadowy figures, and it felt like this chapter of my life after I touched this drug. I was starting to see things, And I don't know if it was the spiritual realm. It felt like it. All theory. I'm not saying this is what it was. I think this is what it was. And it was very scary because I was being like haunted by these things. Just like the lie I had told in the beginning of my addiction that started it all. The lie that I said and had tried alcohol and marijuana before was the same lie that I had told at the end of my addiction, and I didn't know it was the end of my addiction at the time. I was on this drug for 3 months, which was essentially the last months of my active addiction at the same time. It was the beginning of the end, and I was living under my great-grandma's roof, and I was hallucinating. I was not myself. I was extremely malnourished, and I was scared. I just remembered terror. And I was held captive. You know, I was put in very scary situations, dangerous and scary situations. And when I would go home, at my great grandma's house, I would have, I call them night tremors. It was when I would have sleep paralysis. And I would be I would have like these things on top of me and I couldn't breathe, or they'd be messing around in the room and I couldn't get out of like my body, you know, like sleep paralysis and how creepy that is every night, all the time. And I had to put Joyce Myers on my phone to get them to leave me alone. I'd put it on YouTube on my phone and I'd lay down there and I'd have Joyce Myers on, and then I'd try to fall asleep again. And that helped some nights. Other nights and then I'd wake up and sweat. I'd wake up and sweat and I would be so scared because it felt like there was just this really, really dark entity in my room. And again, I don't know if this was just the drug I was on or what, you know, it's hard to tell. And there would be some nights where I would go lay in bed with my great grandma. I'd go in her room and I felt like they couldn't touch me in there. Like it was weird. I didn't feel their presence anymore and I would be able to sleep. And that's just really sad. That's really sad, and I am not proud of any of this. And it was just a really scary situation. And I don't know why I kept going back to this drug. It was really hard to stop. And I felt like I had lost myself completely. It was hard to be around my family. That 3 months was just 3 months of like terror. And I struggled with PTSD. And I would start to shake and I'd get like hot flashes. And I remember I had really bad back acne because I would get like these hot flashes and I would just sweat and just literally my body would be like shaking. I was so scared. And that was essentially how I remember this season in my life. One morning, I showed up to my mom's house completely disconnected from reality. And I remember she wasn't angry. I think this was the moment she found out that I was on this drug and I told her. And she wasn't angry, she was scared. And she helped me shower. And she watched me sleep for days. She had to see me in that state, and I just feel so bad. I just saw it on her face, like how sad she was for me and scared because she was losing her daughter to addiction. And I missed God. I had gotten pulled over. My car broke down. It was snowing and my car it didn't break down, it got stuck in the snow. And a cop had checked to see if everything was okay, realized that I was drinking, and I went to jail. And my mom called, and I always say this is the call that saved my life because, again, like I said in the previous story, she gave me two options. She was like, you could go to social detox for 2 weeks, or I'll come pick you up and I'm gonna get you a job and you need to like work. And this was mid-COVID. And she was like, you just work because there's a scary virus out and it's just everything is so uncertain right now. And I didn't choose either of those two options. I was like, Mom, I want to go to treatment. And she was like, okay, let me call you back. And apparently she had started bawling, and I waited for her to call me back. And she called me back and was like, you're gonna go to treatment in 2 days. I'll come pick you up. You leave in 2 days. There I was again with those 2 suitcases. And I was so tired of packing those 2 suitcases. And I said to God, I was like, I hope this is the last time I ever have to pack my life like this. And he said, but this time you're packing with me. And I just started bawling. So there I was in the kitchen at my great grandma's house with my 2 suitcases. And I was hugging my great grandma goodbye. And she whispered to me, get the most out of it. And I will always talk about those words because they were life-changing. Because I carry those words now. When I went to treatment, I tried to get the most out of my classes, the most out of my one-on-one therapy sessions, out of my packets. Like whatever I'm doing, I will always remember her saying that to me. And now, even being outside of treatment, I try to get the most out of like my college classes and things like that. And I remember looking back now when I was saying goodbye to her in the kitchen, that version of me was saying goodbye for good. That malnourished, addicted, and terrified version of me never did go back. And that really was the end of my active addiction. So when you see joy in my life, balloons and laughter, and my creativity, it comes from knowing how dark it once was. God gave me another day. He gave me another chance. And if even one person listening right now chooses life today, then this podcast has definitely done its job. And you can start again and again and again, because rock bottom isn't too far for God to reach. God is the rock on the bottom. No valley is too dark. No drug is too strong. No soul is too lost. Jesus will always find you and meet you where you're at. You just have to be ready to surrender your life over to Him. And I'm so happy I made that decision, and I just want more people out there who is struggling to find sobriety, no matter what it may look for other people. Sobriety, I believe, looks different for every single person. Everybody has a different upbringing. Everybody has different levels of addiction. Mine, I just so happened, had to try a harder drug in order to get there. But I don't think you have to reach that point in your addiction to choose sobriety. Psalm 132 verse 1 says, Lord, remember David and his self-denial. In recovery, self-denial doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means choosing not to escape them. For me, self-denial looks like this: sitting with grief without a drink, feeling anxiety without numbing it, carrying anger and shame and loneliness without reaching for substances, and letting the emotions pass while trusting God to hold me. This isn't weakness. This is a living worship. And this is flesh versus spirit. Addiction trained me to satisfy the flesh immediately. Make it stop, make it quiet, make it feel better right now. Recovery, especially faith-based recovery, retrains my spirit to say, God, I will wait for you. I will feel this sober. I will not run. That is self-denial. And getting sober becomes sacred because now I sit with emotions sober. I'm not denying myself relief. I'm denying false relief. I'm creating a space for real healing. I'm choosing God's presence over a chemical comfort. And just like David denied himself rest until God had a dwelling place, I deny myself substance so God can dwell in my pain, in my body, and in my mind.
Hey, if you're listening and your heart feels tired, you're not broken. You're becoming, and it's okay to start over again.
Yes, it is okay to start over again. And again and again and again. Well, I'll do a closing prayer. Lord Jesus, we surrender the weight we've been carrying. We release the blame and the shame and the fear, and we ask you to lead us out of darkness and into a brand new life. Restore what addiction tried to steal, heal families, renew minds, and remind every listener that we are never too far gone. We choose life and we choose you. In Jesus Christ's name, amen. Thank you guys for tuning in, and catch you back next Monday.